At this time, I would like to introduce our esteemed guests that will briefly share their perspectives about GEO Academies. Please welcome our moderator, Caroline Romer, Executive Director of the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. Also joining her is Linda Johnson, Board Chair of GEO Academies. Carl Maggiore, CEO of New Schools for Louisiana. Chris Meyer, President and CEO, Baton Rouge Area Foundation. And Kenneth Campbell, CEO of New Schools for Baton Rouge.
Successful and moving into what's next in their life and being with educators and people like yourselves tonight. So welcome. I've been asked to lead a little conversation about GEO, and Chris, this panel has one thing in common. Well, they probably have many things in common, but one thing in common is they all boss me around. And so Chris was bossing me on the way up, and he said, be short. So far, I'm not being very short. Anyway, there's no planned questions here, but the idea is, again, we're here to celebrate GEO and the 10 years they've been part of this community, and these are all individuals that have had a role and a part in those 10 years. And so we're just going to have a little conversation about it. And I'll start, Ken, I think I'll start down at your end. So Ken Campbell leads New Schools for Baton Rouge, but before Ken and I, he's on the board for the association. At one point in time, Ken led the Louisiana Department of Education. Wait, I just realized something. Max, where's Max? Are you not coming up, Max?
Max, please.
Max. I realized Max Day with the Louisiana Department of Ed, he is sitting in tonight for our state superintendent, Kate Brumley, who is in DC. So anyway, I need to find a better place to stand. So Ken used to run the Louisiana Department of Education's charter office, and that's where I first met you, Ken. So that's been a long time ago. It means you have been around lots of charter schools, even before your time in Louisiana. What makes GEO special in your mind? Talk a little bit about your...
I think, yeah. So I've been doing charter school stuff now since 1993, 1994, so a long time. And I'm sure longer than anybody else in this room. But I
was back here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly the point at which we all talked about these two twin, kind of components of charters, the parental choice piece and the better education piece, and kind of what we were going to land on in terms of how we define success. And we landed on educational progress, educational improvement for students. And I think the bottom line is that of all the schools we have in Louisiana, GEO, when I think about those schools, it's just done the best job with kids who need it the most. And for me, that is the most special thing. We can talk about a whole bunch of other stuff. We can talk about innovation, we can talk about new designs and programs. The main thing, as Kate likes to say, is the main thing, which is educating children. And GEO does that right now, I think, better than anybody for kids who need it the most.
So Chris, again, Baton Rouge Area Foundation prior to that, New Schools for Baton Rouge prior to that, Louisiana Department of Ed, Recovery School District. We've also worked together for a long time. In your role now, part of your job is investing, of course, into the Baton Rouge community, but it's creating a vision, it's talking to people across this country and world about Baton Rouge, why Baton Rouge. Talk about the role GEO has in that vision and why you think GEO, has had the success it's had.
Yeah, well, I mean, the counselor, the guidance counselor who spoke a minute ago, said it best. I mean, less than 1/3 of 1% of all high school graduates have earned anything beyond a high school degree when they leave high school. Thank goodness for this class, because I think that probably would have been less than 1%. 1% had not been for you guys. I mean, it is absolutely incredible that this school has figured out exactly what the whole point of education is, which is to prepare our young people for a brighter future, for an opportunity to actually go on and seize a better life do better than our parents. That's the whole goal, and ultimately, I just have been really impressed over the decade. This school does not exist in many places, and when we saw the opportunity to help it grow, and now you see the demand from communities all across Louisiana, all across this country that are knocking on the door saying, please bring this here. It takes a special mix. It takes a mix of belief not only of educators and community, but most importantly, it takes the mix of parents. And I just think it's so awesome to see that we now, 10 years later, you've got thousands of kids and thousands of families waking up every day, wanting something better for their kids, and they can get it, regardless of where they live, regardless of what's in their bank account. And I just think that's the whole American dream. And it's something that we believed in 10 years ago when we started New Schools for Baton Rouge. We believed every kid had the potential to achieve greatness. We just had to give more kids the shot at it. And this school's providing it. And frankly, in my mind, I think we need to triple the size of GEO in this community and across the state. And we're certainly going to keep supporting that.
I don't know that everyone recognizes it. So for GEO, sending kids while they're in high school to college on the MFP, that's how we fund public schools in Louisiana, minimum foundation program. So they are using money that's intended for K-12, and they're extending that out at no further cost to these children to basically get that K-14 experience. And it's really not, it's starting to bubble up in our state, that idea of dual enrollment, but you'd be surprised how many districts and folks really fight that idea that they have some responsibility or anything that has to do with college. So it's actually pretty amazing. Max, who again leads the department's charter office, so all charter schools have an authorizer. That authorizer is responsible for ensuring that the charter school is meeting the standards they've set. So Max gets the pleasure of working with folks like myself and GEO and others on those types of things. What makes GEO different? I mean, why you all as a department really recently extended yourselves and really went out on a limb and allowing GEO, for example, to expand into Baker. That was a very controversial issue. So talk a little bit about, why y'all are betting on GEO.
Yeah, sure. Give me a mic, bring up the controversial issue. Let's go from there. First, I just want to say, Dr. Brumley sends his regards. He could not be here tonight. Unfortunately, you're kind of stuck with Margaret Brumley for a few minutes, but just stick with me. We'll get there. I think to answer your question, Caroline, from the authorizer's perspective, being able to look at the models that exist in this state, adults can get lost in conversations and jargon and just completely miss the point. But what we just saw here is what this whole game is about. You just saw 6 young people leave this school with a diploma in one hand and a degree in the other. Right? But that is not happening across the state, and that needs to be happening, not just to make our kids college and career ready, but college and career competitive, which is what we're working towards. The last thing that I would say is that GEO just represents choice across the state. When Dr. Brumley became the superintendent, one of the first things that he put out were the belief to achieve educational priorities, one of which states that choice expands opportunity. And so our work has been really trying to identify areas in the state where that choice doesn't exist and needs to exist, and then finding high quality operators like this one here to fill that gap. And so the last thing that I would just say is that at the department, when we say that choice expands opportunity, we're not just simply talking about choice expanding seats or different options for a family. We believe that if families have the option to choose what's best for their student, that kid's going to grow up, be college and career competitive, and then rather than having to live the life that chose you, these kids are in control. They're living the life that they choose. So that's what choice means to us. We think that's what GEO represents, and that's why we're happy to be here tonight.
Charter law almost more than 25 years ago now. We have about 150 charter schools in the state, serving about 91,000 kids. And they're in rural, they're in urban, They are large CMOs, single site, that they are not taking over the world per se, although some like to come at us like we are doing something wrong, but it has been very, the whole choice movement in the state is really, blowing up, and now we have new schools, New Orleans, we have new schools, Baton Rouge, and now we have new schools, Louisiana, that Kara is leading. And so Kara, talk a little bit about what GEO needs to go do more. I know you've been in Shreveport, you go to Monroe, you're going out to California to find great operators. Talk a little bit about what we as a community can do to better support the GEOs and make sure that they're there to, serve even more children than they currently are.
I'm going to leave out the charter app on that, okay. So before I do that, I'm going to brag a little bit more than Sandra and her team were willing to brag about themselves. So I worked at New Schools for Baton Rouge before starting to incubate New Schools for Louisiana. I worked with 24 schools across 8 operators. Without a doubt, this team is the most collaborative, transparent, and self-reflecting team I have worked with. Every weird project, curriculum, offer we bring to them, they take on and they execute in a way that is deeply beneficial for their students. Sandra can say we offer Ed Rising to them, but they have to make it work. And they are making it work for their kids, and that is not true of everybody across the state. And so I am deeply proud to work with them. They have been an incredible partner. Even when conversations get tough, they are actually at their best then, and I'm so appreciative of that. There are, as of my data this morning, 120,000 kids in DNF schools across the state, and over 80% of those students are students of color. And so we have a huge problem. And before I go out and recruit anybody new to the state or bring anyone in, I want to look at who's already doing it well here, and GEO is it. School performance-wise, community engagement-wise, all of it, they are the exemplar, and they are needing to grow. And so what that means is I need to do my job and make sure they've got the funding support, they've got the facility options, and they've got the groundwork in the community. But that also means that these communities that are desperate for schools, literally I started incubating less than a year ago, and they are breaking down the door to have schools yesterday, that they're ready to support them the way that Baton Rouge has, and I hope all of you will continue to do, because without the community support, schools like this can't go as far. And so that'll be a huge piece moving forward.
So we'll pass the hat and then.
Yeah. Yeah, big hat.
Saving the best for last. So Linda Johnson, that you've met earlier as a founding board member here at GEO, Ms. Johnson and I do call her Ms. Johnson. I know, but she's Ms. Johnson to me. Ms. Johnson served on our State Board of Education for 13 years, long time, really long time. And we have spent a lot of time together in meetings talking about what we dream about for students in Louisiana and what we want out of public schools. And just frankly, Ms. Johnson wasn't always a big fan of charter schools, and so when she rolled off the board at Bessie and started being engaged with GEO, I was thrilled. I'm like, this is it. She's come to the light.
It doesn't matter if it's a charter school, if it's a good public school, if it's a private school, if it's a home school, which I never thought I would say those 2 words in my life. It is still my passion. I guess 13 years ago, I had Sheila Calamo kept calling me on the phone to go and see a school in Gary, Indiana. And because it was a charter, I absolutely had no interest. But she would not leave me alone. And finally I told her, okay, Sheila, I'll go and see this little school. Left New Orleans in the morning, spent the day in Gary, and came back to New Orleans in the same night. So that ought to tell you I was not interested. But what happened when I got there, I learned something. And what I learned is what I wanted in Louisiana. They were running a preschool program, and they were running a college preparatory program, and they were using the dollars that were earmarked for education. And I thought, we can't get, and then, by the way, call me, I'll go to the legislature, which, because they keep taking money out. They really don't know what they're doing. They just took early childhood money out of the budget. Well, in Gary, at the time, they were doing preschool with the same dollars. And I'm an early childhood person. I love early childhood programs. So I wanted that in Louisiana. But then they were also running this college program, taking these kids from where they were and putting them on the college campus. I'm a first generation college graduate. I'm also a first generation high school graduate. And guess where I come from? Clackamas. I hadn't been on Southern University's campus till I went as a freshman. Had never been on it. So you see, I understand that there are opportunities for our children if they are given the opportunity. And what they were doing in Gary impressed me, and I wanted those two things. Got one, got the high school piece, and I'm going to get the early childhood piece if the Lord lets me live long enough, because somebody needs to get it right. You got to start there in order to get here. So we have to get that part right. So what does GEO do? There are two young men back here who have welding certificates. I know Stephen Wackenback is gone, but I made him sit with those kids because I know he knows how to get them a job. They already got the certification. They need to go to work. So, and I think they have the card. And if Stephen doesn't do it for him, he'll get it from me, and I know he doesn't want that to happen. So, but that's what we need to have happen in our state. We need our children to be competitive. I like being career competitive. Because if you're career competitive, even with all of the trades, you can make a ton of money. And as Caroline said, when I was telling her, make more money than she makes if you get the right trades. So these things are good. And what we've done here, it's amazing. I really thought, and I have said this before, people have heard me say it, we started with 160 plus kids, K-3. And I said, I will be with Jesus before I see a high school graduation. Because I thought it would take just that long. But it didn't. We had an opportunity to take over a school at Mid-City, which was a K-8. So that got us the 8th grade kids. And then, because 8th graders have to go somewhere, we ended up with the high school. So we have one of the best opportunities that for children in our state. And yes, I think it is something that ought to be modeled. But I also think that there are districts who can come here and learn, if they would, on how to do this. This is not rocket science. You don't have to have a degree in aeronautics. You can come in and follow Sandra Douglas around and you'll learn something. And then you can take it back to your school and implement it. So it's not that big of a deal. But people just don't want to do it. And every time they don't want to do it, a child who looks like me is lost. And I don't want that to happen. So I want education. I'm passionate about this. I'm really passionate. Education ought to be for everybody, and it ought not have anything to do with your zip code. Amen. I walked 70805 when we started this and went to every house and begged people to send their children to our school. What did they say about 70805? High crime area. But I didn't care. Because those kids deserve the same thing as the children who grow up away in my house. So yes, I am very passionate about this, and I know we've done a good job, but you cannot do anything good unless you have good people. You gotta first have good people, and then of course you can't do none of this if somebody doesn't send their children. Because you gotta have the children. So we have to keep telling people to send their children. You make the decision and send your children. I have to make a couple of other comments. Y'all saw the band when you came in? Yes. Outstanding band. Yes. Traveled all over. Yes. You heard me Carter say, the choir, that little boy, he's going to be outstanding somewhere. He has a great voice. But these are things that happen in a short window of time. And so when something happens in a short window of time, that tells me we can do this far greater if we get enough people wanting to do it right. It is, Caroline, it is the will that doesn't exist in the legislature. Why I don't have my preschool program. It is the will. It is not about money. Because right now we flush with money. So it's not about that. They don't understand that you gotta take some of these little children and start them off early in order to get them in. So that's my take on this.
I'll pick you up at 10 tomorrow because Senate Education Committee is tomorrow and they got the MFU resolution in there. So I'll have the coffee and donuts.
By the way, teacher payment is taken out there, so y'all know. The legislators took it out.
They themselves a pay raise.
I know, so they said that they did not take it.
We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, that is, I mean, unless someone else wants, I mean, that was pretty solid ending. Thank you, everybody, for being here.